welcome to Lessons Learned. I'm Sherry. This is Monday Quilt Chat. Welcome on in. Get your favorite drink, have a seat. We're going to chat about all the quilty things. We have something really special today for you to listen to. It's kind of like a podcast interview. We're going to learn more about Mark McGill. That is my husband. So we're going to have a little interview with him in the middle of this video. As a matter of fact, it's probably going to be the majority of the video. So I hope you do enjoy. I do want to talk about a few quilty things like I normally do here on Mondays. First, I had a very productive weekend with sewing. I did 4 twizzle blocks. I finished my number 3s and I started into my number 4s. I got one number 4 block done. I'm getting a little bit better vision of how this is going to look, and making sure that I've got things in the right place to get the, let me see if I can show you the magazine here. Hold on just a second. Here's how it's supposed to go together. And you see how there's some darker pinks and darker teals in there, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm going to get the right color, pick up the right colors to make these blocks. I have one block number 2 on hold right now because I ran out of one of the colors, one of the prints, and I'm just gonna hang on to that to see if I need to make some adjustment somewhere, or my using another version of that same tone is okay. So that's what I get for doing one block at a time instead of doing one piece section, those wedges at a time. But anyway, I'm getting somewhere on that. And then also, just as a couple of distractions from that, I did a Harriet's Journey block. So you'll see that on Friday. Super, super simple. Didn't take very long. And then I did 7 16 patches out of the pink grunge. So that was quite a bit. And I did a potload of ironing on my mother-in-law's stash, and got some of those pieces either flat folded or rolled on the magazine boards. And I talked to my helper today, and she's moving along really well with the cutting of the fat quarters, the 5-inch and the 12-inch or 10-inch squares that I had her do, and 2.5s also she's doing for me. So she's learning the thrill of using a rotary cutter and an OFA mat. She was telling me how gratifying that is to cut with that. So hopefully she'll come back and grab some more when she gets those done. I think she said she was pretty close to getting her stack done, so she can come back and do some more because I still haven't unloaded those 2 boxes yet. And I'm kind of anxious to see what's in there now. I did find, I think I told you in the part 1 video of the what to do with this stash, that I found a fat quarter that went with a kit. And so I got that kit out yesterday and put that fabric in there with that. So now I do know that I have a complete kit, and what the kit didn't include was a backing, and it's like I think it's either 30 or 31 square. It's a table topper. I happened to see through this stack of laundered fabric one of those prints that was in that kit, and I was like, was that supposed to be in that kit too? And it would have been easily missed had I not, I don't know, it just came to me. That's that same stuff that's in that kit. And it was a piece of yardage. It was a yard of, regular yardage for that kit. Even though the kit didn't include it, she had ordered the backing for it. The potential backing she wanted to use for it. So I thought that was pretty cool. I have an entire kit now and the backing to make. And it all came from different places. I mean, most of it was in that little plastic bag with the pattern, but the other two pieces were scattered far and wide. But I was able to bring those back. So now I'm anxious to see, is there some stuff in that those other two boxes that goes with some of the fabric that, you know, that I've already processed? Could be. I found some pieces of yardage that do go together. They have the same name, especially the stuff from Connecting Threads that she got in like the 2013 to 15 years. She was ordering from them, which is very nice fabric. And so, you know, I'll find that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of the same line. So I'm trying to keep all those together. So it's turning out to be quite the stash. If I've not said that once, I'm telling you again this time. But that's what I did this weekend. Yes, I did. I feel pretty accomplished over that. I sewed until I just couldn't sew anymore, and I ironed fabric and rolled fabric until I could not do it anymore. And there we are. It was a productive weekend. I hope yours was productive too. Put down in the comments what you got done. I'd be anxious to see what you got done this weekend too. Not done, but you know, what did you accomplish? So we are going to have that interview with Mark. Now I'm going to go ahead and insert that interview right here. So you've heard me talk about Mark, my husband Mark. So he's been in a lot of our Monday quilt chat conversations here lately for a specific reason mostly. We'll talk about that more towards the end. But I had him sit down with me here so we could have a little chat and find out who Mark is. You already know he's my husband. And of course, Blue's dad. So now you've met the whole family. So I had some questions that I prepared for Mark so that you can get to know him and get to know what some of our future plans are here on Lessons Learnt and beyond. So I'm just going to go ahead and start in with my questions, if that's all right, Mark.
Yep, that's fine with me.
Okay. So what are some jobs that you've worked in during your life? What kind of professions have you had?
Well, I started out working with my uncle, Eldon, and he's a carpet installer, and also he did like vinyl flooring installation back then. He wasn't doing wood floors, so did that with him for several years, and that's a really physical job. It's a very hard job. It's hard on your body, but it was a good way to start learning to do like a trade. And along the same time, I was also doing mowing grass. There was some neighbors who had pretty large yards, and I was mowing grass on the side. After that, I got into working in power line construction, as you know. And so that company was named Irby, and I was climbing power line towers, the steel towers you see out when you're driving through the countryside. And I worked in all kinds of different roles with that, from foundations that they put down on the ground, dynamite, blasting, and construction of the towers, and then also working up on the towers as like what people would think of as a lineman, tightening all the bolts and making sure the entire tower was put together right.
And wasn't that was some of you have heard me talk about us living in Arizona and New Mexico, and you were doing that work out there, weren't you?
Yeah, that was an adventure. So we started in Kentucky when we first moved after we were married and moved with that work. We were down in Kentucky. I started in Tell City, Indiana before we got married, but then once we were married, we lived down in Pineville, Kentucky in the mountains. And then from there we went to Arizona and New Mexico. So it was quite a change in your life to always be moving with your job. But we had some adventures with that type of work. And then after that, I got into something called, a lot of people have heard of Trimline. That is a business where you are putting striping or decals on cars. And I did that for a few years. And after that, I think I worked also at a place called Cordon Energy Center. And that was a wood furnace, wood stove, lawnmower store. So I went and did cleaning of chimneys, I went and I picked up people's riding lawnmower and brought them in for service. I was the mechanic, and I was just learning that I really wasn't a small engine mechanic. Your brother-in-law hired me with the idea that I would learn that skill, acquire it little by little. I went to training, I went to class and things, but there was a lot to learn. And so after that, I was also working in furniture manufacturing. So there was a company in Cordon, Indiana, in New Salisbury named Keller Manufacturing. They made wood furniture, mostly oak and maple, and some other woods, but that was their two primary woods they used. And they made all kinds of kitchen furniture, like tables and chairs, and bedroom furniture and other furniture items. And about that time is when I've been doing that for 5 years, and I was not taking the environment well because it was very hot. It was like you would go in there every day. It was like a sauna. In the morning that felt like a sauna, and then as the day got longer, you were just sweating all day, and the dust was horrible. I worked there for 5 years, and we were talking about what could I do. So I went to school, and that's when I shifted. My career path kind of shifted from hard physical type factory construction jobs to technology, because I got a degree in information technology. So from there, I went to working as a computer operator at nights, and then I shifted into programming. And then ever since then, it's been since around 1993, I've been doing some form of software development, either as a manager, a tech lead, or an architect in software engineering. So that's a lot of different things, but that's what I've been doing.
So how many years altogether have you been doing IT stuff?
93 to current,
okay.
7 plus 25.
Okay.
So it's really 32.
Still 32 years.
32 years, yeah.
It's a long time. That's mostly been your main
most of my life, that's what I've been doing
yeah.
now. Yeah.
Okay, so on another subject, what are some hobbies that you've enjoyed throughout your life?
I think one of the things we have done together a lot is like enjoying nature. Like we've always liked to go to parks, hiking. Even when we were younger, we would do tent camping. So that's something we did a lot. And then hobbies when it comes to like crafting, which I know you're heavily into crafting, sewing and crafting and things like that. My mom was a huge craft type person, and she was always, I remember she had the little sewing machine that had like it looked like a little table with the wooden legs and a little shape of looked like a table would look, but a sewing machine folded out of it.
Like a machine in a cabinet.
A machine in a cabinet. So that's the one I remember. I don't know what other sewing machines she had, honestly, because I was just a little kid. But that's the one that sticks out of my memory, because I remember, it was cool. She would fold that sewing machine up out of there, and then she would turn it on and start sewing things. So I think because she always had that interest in sewing, she had us in all kinds of like craft type things. And one of the things I remember doing a lot of is, I don't remember if they call it hoop rugs. I'm trying to remember if that's what they call it, or they call it something else.
Hook rugs.
Hook? Was it hook?
I think it was called, when I started doing it with you, it was called latchet hook rugs.
Latchet hook. Okay, so what it was you took a piece of burlap and you would draw something artistic on it. And the ones I remember that I know I did is I did an elephant. So the elephant was on there and it had its trunk up, turned up, and there were balls, like it was tossing these balls above it. And I remember that was a very it seemed like it was yellow and gray, and some of those balls were some other colors above the elephant. I also did a whale. I remember doing a whale, and that was like a black whale in like blue, like in the water. So those were, it took a long time because you sewed all that yarn in, and you made this little loop that stuck up, and then you went through and you cut all those loops, and it gave you that real nice texture of the yarn. And so we did a bunch of those. That's the only two I can remember. And the other thing that we did as kids that she got us started on is, I don't remember what they call this either, but you had these little, it was like a plastic frame that was kind of like a loom, I know it's not a loom. I know that's the wrong word, but you bought these pieces of things and you made pot pads out of them.
Pot holders?
Pot holder. That's pot holders. That's what you made. So what I would do is, because, you know, those days, your parents weren't just giving you money all the time. Your allowance was like 50 cents, or they might give you a little bit of money, but they never gave you much money. So you had to make money. And so I would make those pot holders and I would sell them. So you could make, like, you know, sit and make a whole bunch of those, and I'd walk around the neighborhood and sell them to the neighbors. They would buy them. You know, you couldn't make much money.
Yeah, but it was enough for a
like,
kid.
Well, it was like Connor Shopping Center was near our house, which you had to walk 20 minutes to get there. They'd let us walk up there. You could buy those little paper brown bags that would be about like this tall. You could buy a whole bag of that for $1 candy.
Penny candy.
Penny candy. So we would
although I don't think it was just a penny when we were buying it.
Yeah, but we would go up there and we would at least have $1 because we wanted to be able to buy a whole bag.
Yeah.
And we would buy our bag of candy, which was probably awful and messed our teeth up. But yeah,
that was the first thrill of making a living, doing some sort of craft.
Yeah. Well, the only other alternative was when I got old enough, even on Taylor Drive in Jeffersonville, I mowed grass a little bit, but I was like 11-year-old kid, which is probably dangerous. And, you know, you would get $5, or you wouldn't get much money to mow somebody's yard back then. So the other thing was bottles. Even though my mom and dad were buying the groceries, all your Cokes were in those glass bottles. We wanted those bottles bad because, you know, it was like 3 cents or 5. I can't remember.
I was thinking they eventually got up to 10 cents, but maybe a nickel.
Yeah, something like that. So, but if you could get a whole set of those bottles, you had part of your candy money.
Yeah.
So, you know, besides those things, getting money was tough back then. And then my dad would, if he wanted help around if he was digging up bushes or something hard labor, my dad would actually say, okay, if you'll help me dig these bushes out and do this or that, I'll give you 75 cents or $1. You know, so, you know, you'd get money like that. But yeah, making those pot holders, that was kind of cool because that was a way you could make money.
All right. So that kind of covers the hobbies. Have you had any hobbies in your adult life other than some of these that we've mentioned, like the latchet hook? We were dating and he was doing that latchet hook rug stuff, and it kind of intrigued me that he would do something like that, but he taught me how to do it, and before long we were doing it together.
Yeah. I think...
Have you done any woodworking? Or?
I think I've done a lot of little woodworking type crafts, you know, like making things out of wood. Like, for example, at my mom and dad's house, they had a huge wall in the living room. It's probably 12 feet across space, something like that, 10 or 12 feet. And I made them built-in, you know, wood cabinets on that wall. And I think that's about the same time I was at Keller's. It seems like it was in the same time frame when I was working at the
wood
Keller
factory.
The wood factory, yeah. So I didn't have all the tools back then, but I really wanted to build things. Like, it got me intrigued with the whole thing about building things out of wood. So those turned out pretty nice. They're still there.
It was probably in the early 90s that you
early
did
90s.
that.
So that's 35. You know, that's 35 years ago that I built those, and we're clearing out my mom's house right now, and they're still there. They're still all together. They're not broken down or anything. Now, they're not the most professional looking. They're not like you wouldn't pay top dollar in the store, but they still look pretty decent.
In my opinion, they're kind of not exactly rustic, but almost.
Yeah,
you know?
they're like close to rustic because I didn't have any way to do professional finishing. Like in Keller Manufacturing, they sand that wood. They have wood filler. They fill in all the little defects in the wood before they finish it, and you get this really nice finish.
Yeah,
you know, of wood.
And all those layers of shellac and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and then they'll spray it, and then they sand it again, and then they spray it, then they sand it again. So I didn't go to that level, but yeah, it turned out pretty decent.
Yeah, and just even in more recent times, you've done some woodworking, either out of necessity or, well, I've showed you all before how he made a barn quilt to put on one of our pole barns out there. He's got another one that he could probably work on sometime too. What hobby did you begin to enjoy in the last couple of years, though? Something really different.
Well, yeah, that's really something. So we went on a trip to Florida, and Sherry probably thought I was crazy. So we're down at Florida, and we're staying at this friend's condo. I think we're there for a week. I can't remember if we're there for a week or what.
Probably.
And I'm down here in Florida, and I'm like, what am I going to do with all this free time? Because you were sewing.
I think we were going to stay. That was one of the times that we stayed an entire month.
Weren't you sewing?
I was sewing, and it was the very beginnings of my channel.
So you were sewing, and I was kind of like, there's not that much on TV. What am I going to do? And I'd always had this interest in, the planets and the moon, and looking at, trying to look through I always had this I've always been watching there's these shows on like the Science or History Channel about the universe. I've always enjoyed that. So I ordered a telescope to be delivered while we were there at the condo. And so I didn't know what I was doing. It was the most awful telescope choice I could have ever made. It's like the most horrible telescope ever. But it's how I got started. You could check the moon out with it, but the optics were not good. It was very clunky to use, and it was all manual. So you're trying to look at something, even the moon, and the whole time you're trying to look at it, it's going out of the field of view. And so you constantly have to remove the telescope to see it, which was, an awful experience. But it got me started. And so ever since then, I have been learning on my own, watching YouTube videos, reading articles. I got better telescopes. I got a better, what they call a mount, which a telescope sits on. And then finally, once I got far enough along, I started doing what's called astrophotography, which is taking images of like galaxies or nebula or planets. I'm not so much into the planets because I've tried to do the planet astrophotography, but it's quite challenging if you don't have what they call a long focal telescope. If you have one that's a bigger telescope and it's got a real high magnification, you can get better pictures of planets. But with the other type telescopes that I'm using, you can get a picture of like Saturn and you can see that it has the rings. But in Jupiter, you can make out that spot on Jupiter, and those bands of gases. It's not a very sharp, it's really hard to get a real super crisp, sharp image of planets because they're very small. And so, but the galaxies, that actually has been like a really awesome thing to get into, is the galaxies and the nebula, because those are very rewarding to image. You have to take images all night. You basically set up your telescope, it's tracking the object. You capture images all night. And then there's a whole other process afterwards where you take all that data you collected and you combine it together to produce an image of that nebular galaxy.
So there's a computer involved.
There's a computer involved, and not only on the capture, but also when you're doing the post-processing. So another thing that happened is I was carrying all my stuff outside, as you well know. If I wanted to leave the telescope out overnight, I had to carry all my stuff outside, set it up, and you got to align everything. And then in the morning, you leave it out there all night. In the morning, you have to go back and break it all down and put it in your house because there's the sun baking it, there's a potential for rain or someone stealing it. So eventually, recently, I had when we were building our pole barn for the camper, I had those guys build an observatory on top. And so in the upper room, I actually have a concrete, it almost looks like a chimney, looks like a concrete block chimney, but all it is really is a pillar that goes up to that second level floor. And then I have a metal pillar on top of that the telescope mount attaches to. And so now I don't have to break my stuff down every night. I can leave that all set up. The only thing I have to do is open the roof. So I open the roof, it's motorized, and I set up the session to capture everything. And once it's time to go to bed, I just leave it. I make sure there's not going to be rain, and I just leave it overnight, and then I can just go in the morning and close the roof, and bring the computer to collect the images that I captured. So it's something I find very rewarding and very interesting. But it's definitely been a several year learning experience to get to where I'm at now.
Yeah, and so it sounds like you've made a lot of progress with that hobby and kind of honing your skills and doing that hobby. Where can we go to see some of the images that you've captured and this observatory that you've created?
Well, I do have on Facebook and Instagram, Mark's Astro Journey. I have some of my images posted there. So someone who just wants to see the images and not have to watch a video, they can actually just go there. But I also have my channel on YouTube, Mark's Astro Journey. And the only thing I'll say about that is it depends on the person's interest level, because some of those videos are about the techniques or like a tutorial.
They're very technical.
It could be technical. So I would say someone who just wants to see a picture, they'd probably go to Instagram or Facebook. If someone is interested in the hobby, then that's where YouTube comes in, because the channel's more about how to do certain things or how to make it easier.
Right. So that's always linked in the description box of all of my videos, his channel name, if you want to go over there and check out some of the videos. It might not be for everyone, and I know a lot of you have watched them and do watch them. He doesn't put out as many videos as we do on Lessons Learnt. Of course, he's waiting on clear skies and perfect weather and all that to be able to even do that process. So the videos don't come out very often, but I think he does have some getting ready to be queued up on that channel. So what is some hobby that we have been doing together lately?
Well, as we talked about earlier, how my mom had this interest in sewing and crafts. My mom also has a quilting history. But interestingly, as we discovered, we've been going through my mom's house, and we've been going through her crafting stash and her sewing stash. And I don't recall when I was a kid quilting being part of her craft. But we're finding that she was doing quilts by hand. So it's very interesting. It piqued my interest that, my mom had all these interests in all these crafts, but one of them was quilting. So she had vision as she started getting a lot of vision issues as she got older, and it limited what she could do. And as we've seen from what we found, she had projects in progress she couldn't finish. Probably because of that or her other health issues.
Right.
So what you have on the table is part of what we've been doing together is, so you showed me how to use a sewing machine. I was not really a sewing machine person. I've seen it all my life, but I've never done it. No one ever said, sit down and try to sew. And so I had to learn how do you use the basics of using a sewing machine. And then also to make a quilt, you also showed me about planning the quilt, how much fabric do you need, and also what fabrics would you choose, and how would you go about cutting the pieces for your quilt overall. So this is from my mom's fabric stash, and she hadn't started this quilt. So what we did is we took, I think you had this red color.
Yeah, I had. There was one more to make the two different 9 patches. There was one more print that we needed, which I had one that coordinated really well. And then this is red grunge that we used for the sashing.
So you had the animals and you had the sashing.
And I also had
the backing.
Right. And you all have seen this quilt on a Friday video already. This is not a different one. This is the same one. And this is a pretty good, large lap size quilt, if not a twin. So yeah, this was mostly from these prints are from her stash. He just wanted something to practice on, so I pulled out enough to do this with adding a few things, and that was his first quilt, and it turned out really, really good. So he's a good quilter. So what are some of your plans you have for quilting going forward? What kind of new tools have you learned to use and all that besides the sewing machine and the rotary cutter?
I think learning to use the rulers also is important, and you were showing me some of the techniques for that and some of the different rulers that are important, not just cutting the initial pieces of fabric, but like squaring them up and things like that. So that's something that you've been showing me, which has been interesting to learn. But then I've also been learning EQ8 software because I wanted to...
I won't for some reason.
Well, you've had EQ8 for
probably a year and a half.
You've had it for a year and a half, and I think it's like a lot of software. It's the user interface. Sometimes when you get in, you start looking at it, and it's, you're reading a tutorial or something about how to do something. It's not the easiest thing to follow sometimes, and I understand that. So I thought it would be interesting because you're always talking about it'd be so nice to be able to have your own quilt patterns. And so I thought, well, I learned Final Cut Pro, which we're using to edit your videos. I figured if I could learn this, then we could create quilt patterns. I know you have a lot of ideas for quilt patterns you would like to do. And so what I did is I took that EQ8 software and I put together my first quilt pattern. So that's one of the things that I've been working on, along with the basic tools and the sewing machine, and working on this quilt.
Okay, so he's created a quilt pattern. So did you create also a pattern company?
Yeah, so I've started Ruler's Edge Design.
We'll put a little icon of that up there.
Yeah, so I thought, if I'm going to create quilt patterns, there ought to be some branding about the quilt patterns and where they're coming from. So, you helped me with that too. We worked on that together, and that's what we called it, as Ruler's Edge Design. And also, I thought, well, if I'm going to create quilt patterns, why not have a YouTube channel where I could present those quilt patterns to people? I know a lot of people now, you've commented about you want to use a quilt pattern, and it's in a magazine, or it's on Fat Quarter. What is it? Fat Quarter Shop?
Yeah.
Is that the name of the?
Or some other pattern company.
Right. And so basically, they're copyrighted. If you want to do a tutorial or quilt along, sew along, then people are going to have to either buy that magazine, get that magazine, buy that quilt pattern from an online source. And the reason they have to buy that is because this whole copyright thing. You can't, as someone else, get on a video and say, here is the exact size you need. You can't give all the specific instructions, right?
That's right.
So I think this way, with a channel, I can present those quilt patterns. We can make those quilt patterns available free to the viewers of our channel. And that way they don't have to fool with, where do I go get this quilt pattern?
Right.
We'll have that available also in the video. We can present the details of the quilt pattern on the screen and talk about all the specifics and not be thinking about, is this copyrighted?
And you can also download the free patterns in a PDF form, printable PDFs. So that's exciting, isn't it? We're going to have free patterns. And not only will he have free patterns on his channel, but he will be writing some patterns for Lessons Learned as well. So that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. Nobody really wants to pay for those patterns these days, or buy a book to get one pattern out of and things like that. So here we're going to be able to provide you some good patterns, and we're going to start out kind of simple as he's learning, and go from there in difficulty range. But so you said that you already have a pattern. So what's going on with that?
Yeah, so there's an interesting thing about EQ8 software is I came into it maybe thinking like other people, if this is a quilt pattern software, I'll be able to design my quilt pattern and I'll just be able to print something. I'll be able to click print out of there and it'll give me the whole quilt pattern. Well, no, that's not the case. Because as you started to show me quilt patterns, it became very clear. EQ8 has some good capabilities of producing certain details about the pattern you design, but it's not really written. It's not going to produce any output that's written the way a quilt pattern is written you would buy or someone would
like
publish.
Do this step, then do that
exactly
step.
Like here's the fabric requirements, here's the cutting instructions, and then as you move on to the different blocks within the quilt, how do you go about assembling those blocks and then joining the parts of the quilt together. So it doesn't really do that. It has some instructions around those things, but as we started to print those out, we looked at, quilt patterns. You've used many hundreds of them, I'm sure. It was like obvious, okay, we can't produce a quilt pattern that you could share with someone else out of here. We have to go into Word, and we have to take some of the details we can get out of EQ8 and put it in Word, but we also are going to have to write real specific things like the instructions and the piecing, some of that stuff around the piecing and which fabric pieces go into which blocks and all of that.
Right. All right. So you've produced a pattern. We've got all the instructions ready to go, and so it's ready to be used. So who's going to do that first quilt?
Well, it's going to be me, because I know you wanted me to write a quilt pattern for you, and I'm going to do that. But I thought one good way to show the proof is in the pudding is to make the quilt, take the quilt pattern, and actually do all the, get the fabric, make sure that all the instructions about how much fabric you need and the pieces that you need to cut out of each fabric, and then the instructions also for assembling the blocks and joining the quilt together, that all of that actually works properly, so that, it gives us confidence that if we take all the details we can pull out of EQ8 and we create our quilt pattern in Word with, the things that we add specifically, that someone can take that quilt pattern, they can make that quilt, and everything in there is going to work, and it's going to make sense.
Right. That's called pattern testing.
Yeah.
So you're testing your own patterns.
That's right.
And so how's that going?
Well, actually, I finished that quilt, and I have a video that I'm going to come out with on Tuesday.
Tomorrow. You guys can go to his channel tomorrow and sew along with Mark. So what's the name of the channel?
Well, it's The Quilter's Architect is what we named it.
Okay, we're going to put that across the screen here. All right, so how many episodes have you produced so far?
It's going to be a total of 4 episodes. Okay. I'm working on the last episode, and I have the first 3 done. So I was thinking about publishing those maybe like over a series of days, spreading those out over a few days.
Okay. So there's a potential that we're going to see a video either from LessonsLearnt or Quilter's Architect every day this week.
Yeah.
I hope you don't get sick of us.
They might.
All right. Well, is there anything else you want to add to your plans for the future, or any encouragement you have for my viewers today?
Well, I would just say look forward to Sherry's sew-alongs, where she has her own quilt pattern, and she doesn't have to say you're going to have to go to this magazine to get that, or to this other place to get that quilt pattern. And hopefully we can come up with some really cool designs, because even like recently we've been looking at panels. I know there's all kinds of variations on quilts, but I think one of the things that I'm looking forward to is we have some panels with animals, and we also have some panels with some outer space objects in them. I think one of the things I would really like to do is take one of the outer space panels. I would like to use a combination of some type of star blocks. I haven't settled in on which ones it is. I don't want to overcomplicate them, but as you know, stars in the sky look somewhat different than stars in a quilt block.
Sure.
But yeah, it's obviously a different thing. But
just kind of meld the two things.
Yeah. So I'm curious to see what kind of different things I can do to produce a very interesting quilt pattern with a panel, and also some different star blocks or other blocks included in it.
Sounds like fun. And we can do that too, can't we? So, all right. Well, it's been fun talking to you, Mark. Now everyone knows you a little bit better, or maybe a lot better.
Yeah.
and what some of our plans are for the future for quilting. Both of us, sounds like both of us are going to be quilting. He does have a full-time job still at this point, so yeah, his time's going to be a little bit limited, but he's already ahead. So maybe we can keep the videos coming on his channel as well. And I hope you will go over there tomorrow morning and check out the first video. Subscribe. You'll get to see what that pattern is, what fabrics he's chosen, and all of that. And then just keep tuning in and you'll see the quilt completely finished, because I long armed it and he bound it. So he has a finish for next Friday. I don't know if it'll be this Friday, because your videos will have to come out first.
Yeah, my video might be trailing your finish it Friday.
Maybe not this Friday, but the next you'll see it, but you'll see it in his video anyway. So all right, thank you very much for tuning in with us today with Mark, and we'll just get back to the rest of Monday Quilt Chat. So how about that? We have another channel. We have a pattern company to write us free patterns. I have another sewer here in the house. I don't know if he'll be able to help me. I'll probably still be helping him for a while. But he's doing great with his sewing. He does have that quilt completely done. And yeah, it's all in the can right now. The whole series on that first quilt pattern that he designed. I had nothing to do with that quilt design. You'll see it tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Not tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow, Tuesday. Yep. That's you're gonna get a whole load of us this week. You're gonna get either me or him all week long until he's ready to, start a new project. So hopefully there won't be too much time in between like there is on the ASTRO photography videos, but that is what it is. But I hope you will go over there and subscribe and give some support to his channel. He would be so thrilled if you did. Give him a thumbs up and some good comments, and most of all, we need to get that channel going, so because if it doesn't move very much, he will scrap it. So we don't want that, do we? So get over there and subscribe. All right, thank you so much for doing that. And then also I have our quilt of the week, our art quilt of the week, and I enjoyed seeing your all's Facebook post of the landscape quilts that you did along with me on Wednesday of this past week. That's so much fun. I just love doing that. And like I said on the video, I just should do more of those. They're so easy, and it just makes a great little quilt and a great gift for someone. So this though is from our I say our, I know all of you don't have this, but the Quilt Art engagement calendar has a quilt for us this week, and I will put a picture right here. This is called Ombre Star. It's 68 by 68. It's by Susan Dashinsky of Mamaroneck, New York. Using so much color provided some fun to Susan as she worked on this quilt. But placing the templates strategically provided a bit of a challenge, especially in relation to the ombre fabric that she used for this particular quilt. Susan worked with Shelley Pagliai of Prairie Moon Quilts, having Shelley do the quilting. This quilt has since won second place at the May 2023 Northern Star Quilt Show in Purchase, New York. And there's a note here that says the pattern is the Crimson Poppy pattern by Judy Niemeyer of quiltworks.com. And we know Judy Niemeyer's patterns are just spectacular, are they not? And this one is no less. And the ombre fabric, now if some of you don't know what ombre fabric is, along the width of fabric, it goes from dark to medium to light to medium to dark again, and it just all kinds of blends in both directions like that. And as you cut your fabric pieces out from it, here she had to really kind of well, strategically do that, because she was trying to get a certain color fade look in her pieces. So that was a challenge. So, and no wonder that it, got a second place prize there in that show. So this is wonderful, and the quilting is wonderful. All those feathers all around and inside, and some leafy patterns as well, and some straight ruler work is done on those little spiky parts. So very, very pretty. I don't know that I would ever attempt a quilt like that. You just never know. I might. But it sure is inspiring, isn't it? As is all of our quilters that send in their finishes on Friday. Yes, they are. From the simplest to the most complicated, they all inspire us. And we're so glad to have that show on Friday. So come back on Wednesday. I'll have something for you. I'm not sure what it is. I'm tossing some ideas up in the air right now. I'm going to see what lands heads up, and that's the one that I'll do. And then back here on Finish It Friday to see what I finished and what you finished. Have a great week quilting. Try to do a little bit of sewing every day if you can, and keep your projects rolling. All right, I'll see you back here Wednesday for that video, and you'll see Mark tomorrow morning. All right, have a great week. Bye.